Up until 2 weeks ago, I would have told you that this is really not my kind of music. But after spending some time with the Yamaha FGDP-50, I was all of a sudden churning out beats like this. I'll give you the main takeaway right away, which is that over the past couple of weeks, these devices, the FGDP-50 and the FGDP-30, they inspired me to play, to practice, and to try new things, which is already more than enough reason to recommend them to anybody who is a little serious about finger drumming. Hashtag not sponsored, by the way. I bought these things myself. But of course, for most of you, the question will be more about, what's the pad sensitivity like? What are the onboard sounds like? Should I get a Yamaha FGDP-50 or should I get a Yamaha FGDP-30, right? And of course, the big question, hey, if I get one of these things, can I then finally get rid of all my existing stuff, right? My laptop, my audio interface, my drum software, just sell all of that, get one of these devices, and then finally, for the first time in my life, experience some true freedom and happiness. Well, let's find out, shall we?
On the quest for groove.
As always, with these gear recommendation videos, make sure you check out the description and the comments below for updates, right? I'll leave a link there to my up-to-date gear recommendations page on questforgroove.com because, things change, technology evolves, and even if you watch this video in the future, you want to know what's going on. And with that said, we can start talking about pad sensitivity and responsiveness. The pad response seems to be the same for both the 50 and the 30. In my experience, these types of units always have small deviations between individual units, right? So you might get a 50 that has a little bit of a more responsive hi-hat pad and then a 30 that has a little bit more of a responsive snare pad or something. But I would not chalk that up to a specific design choice by Yamaha. It seems that the pads of the 30 and the 50 are basically the same in terms of sensitivity. And now we're talking about that. The sensitivity of the pads is decent, but not top of the line. And somewhere where you notice that immediately is with a Muller technique, where you actually use your hand to give a firm hit, and then you lift your arm up and drop your hand down. So just the weight of your hand hits the pad. And that, in most cases, will lead to a little bit of an unreliable response. And I made a little demo for you playing Muller technique on my Machine Mark III with very, very sensitive pad response, and then moving to the FGDP-50. And just to be clear, we're not hearing any onboard sounds yet. This is just me using my Machine Mark III and the FGDP-50 as MIDI controllers, controlling the Addictive Drums plugin inside my computer, right? So that the sound stays the same and we're really listening to the response of the pads. Let me give you one more demonstration. Here's where I use my left hand to bounce very softly on the snare pad to create this little embellishment on both devices. It's not like it never works, it's just unreliable in that super, super soft, almost just brushing your finger over the pad kind of range. And I went through all the settings in the device trying to improve this, but while there are a lot of customizable things like pad gain and pad curves, and you can change a lot of stuff in this device, I couldn't find any setting that actually improved this specific problem. And also the fact that sometimes I could hear an accidental ghost trigger happening already tells me that I can probably not make the lower threshold of these pads more sensitive, because that probably already leads to more double trigger. So I think this is just it. This is what we have to work with, and we can work with it. For example, with Muller technique, I could make it happen by just digging in a little bit more. And with the snare roll, I found myself all of a sudden using two fingers to create a roll, and that's also partially because that broad snare pad really accommodates for that, like this. And this is where things get interesting, because if this was a regular MIDI pad controller, I probably wouldn't have continued talking about it. I just established that the pads are decent but not great, so you can get yourself a Machine Micro Mark III or an X-Jam or maybe a Launchpad Pro Mark III for the same price or less. So, you know, why bother, right? Nice try, but bye. That's how I would dismiss a lot of MIDI pad controllers in the past, and I would then get some pushback from either the manufacturer of the device or maybe user of the device saying like, hey, you're ignoring all this extra functionality, right? Studio One integration, MPE functionality, really nice sturdy rotary knobs, the fact that you can spill beer on it without it breaking because it's waterproof, right? And I would then respond by saying like, hey, those extra features are nice, but I'm never going to use them and I care mostly about the pads, so still, sorry. Now, in come the Yamaha FGDP-50 and FGDP-30, and they're this very, very unique mix of decent but not the best pads together with all kinds of functionality that seems to be tailored towards me, towards finger drummers, right? These devices seem to be designed with the idea of playing finger drums on them. It's not an afterthought, right? They're not designed to control your DAW or for beat making or sampling or whatever. No, they're made for playing. So that brings me to this very unique situation where I already established the pads, and now I'm still going to talk about the extra functionality of these FGDP devices because I think that for a lot of people, those might be the decisive factors in deciding whether you're going to buy one of these things. Now, the two great extra features that these pads have, in my opinion, are the out-of-the-box intuitive pad layout and, of course, the standalone functionality. The FGDP devices run completely standalone on battery power. They charge via USB, which is micro USB still for some reason, not USB-C, but okay, they charge via USB pretty quickly and they last long on a single charge, like hours. Now, the second you turn these things on, that's when the magic happens. And the magic is that you can instantly start playing drums, which is, believe it or not, for the finger drumming world, pretty spectacular. Most of us finger drummers are used to having a setup with a laptop, an audio interface, a pad controller, drum software installed, right? Already makes you tired talking about it. And then every time you want to start playing, you have to walk up the stairs into your bedroom studio, turn everything on, and 5 minutes later you can start playing, right? That's the experience that most of us have. Now, some people will say, hey, what about the standalone MPC Live or Machine Plus or maybe Ableton Push 3? Well, I played all of those devices and let me tell you what they're not. What they're absolutely not, while still very useful devices for other purposes, right? But what they're not is an easy-to-use, quick drum kit in a box. And that is exactly what the FGDP devices are, right? The second I turn these things on, my hands move towards the pads and I'm playing some drums, right? There's an onboard speaker there. It's a small speaker, so not that much bass, but you can hear everything. There's no latency. And the out-of-the-box layout is very, very intuitive. It actually resembles the pad layout that I've been pushing over on questforgroove.com. And on questforgroove.com, by the way, you can find some really nice free beginner courses in finger drumming. If you're ever interested in learning finger drumming, go over there, questforgroove.com. Let me just show you my layout on my Machine Mark III and then compare it to the out-of-the-box layout of an FGDP unit. So as you can see, the core kit, kick, snare, hi-hat, and two cymbals, basically translates one-on-one from one device to the other. And even though on the Yamaha there's this extra row of pads for the toms, the finger spacing between the two devices also remains the same. Now, I want to address this one thing real quick where people told me like, hey, Yamaha stole your layout. Well, to that, I can only say I stole my layout from a guy named Brandon Murphy. Brendan, I love you. You're a legend and a visionary. I stole his layout and then I changed up some things, and then I called that the Quest for Groove layout. I know that Brandon is very adamant about sharing and that we in the finger drumming community should share our stuff. So obviously I did that as well. And now Yamaha probably saw either Brandon's layout or my layout, and they took that and they changed that a little bit, which I would consider evolution and very good for the finger drumming community. Or they thought long and hard about the optimal pad layout and they arrived at the same thing, which makes Brandon a very smart guy, and me also a little bit of a smart guy. Anyways, the pad layout translates very well. There are some changes, but switching from the Quest for Groove layout to this Yamaha FGDP layout was not that big of a problem. Let me just show you, by the way, how on an FGDP-50 with this extra button over here, you can actually just recreate the Quest for Groove layout as well on the FGDP. I'm going to put up both layouts, and then you can pause the video if you want to study it. So yeah, you could technically put everything more or less in the same spot as I always did. I like to have the toms up top because then I can play together with the hi-hats, which is difficult on the FGDP. Let me show you a little demonstration of toms up top versus on the place where Yamaha put them. However, I also do see the benefit of placing the toms where Yamaha has it, and I think I'm actually going to dedicate some time and effort into learning to play the toms the way the FGDP means them to be played. So the idea behind the placement of the tom pads seems to be that you can put a finger on each pad, right? If you rest your hands like this, your fingers fall naturally on one of the tom pads. And you don't have to go aim for those small pads with just your index fingers, which is something that I would do because I really have to get used to this way of playing. I can't do it yet, but I gotta admit, this is not a dumb way to do things. It's actually a pretty inventive and smart way to do it. And I'm gonna see if this thing suits me well if I work on incorporating this way of playing as well. Okay, demo time. Let me show you some cool onboard sounds. Here's a percussion kit. And here's some sort of crazy onboard beatbox kit. And here's me playing along to a Dua Lipa kind of song. And by the way, if you hear a little bit of clipping in this song or a previous song or a song that's coming up, if you hear some clipping, just know that's my fault. It's not the FGDP's fault, okay? Dua Lipa. And here's a demonstration of an acoustic kit. I really enjoyed making all of these demos. It basically just involved me zapping through the device and then hearing some sort of sound and then getting inspired. And because it was so intuitive to play, something fun would come out, right? And I would end up in a place where I never expected to end up. Like also that demo in the beginning, right? Where I all of a sudden played some drum and bass stuff. Like I wouldn't have done that if it wasn't so easily available on the Yamaha and I couldn't instantly play. So I think that really speaks for the device. I do want to make a small disclaimer as a music teacher that, of course, a large part of why I can play all these things is because I've practiced finger drumming for years, right? questforgroove.com. I teach over there. If you ever want to learn, go there because just buying a device won't cut it. Okay, with that said, let me show you that demo on the acoustic onboard oak kit once more, and then we're going to do something interesting. So what I did is I didn't just record the audio of the onboard kit, I also recorded the MIDI data. So now I can feed that MIDI data into a drum plugin on my computer. In this case, Addictive Drums 2, my trusty old drum plugin. Let me show you what that same groove sounds like through my drum plugin. And here's another example, fill played on the onboard kit of the FGDP, and then immediately after that, the same fill, but then through my old-fashioned drum plugin. Now, I didn't show you these examples in order to start a discussion about which kit sounds better. I think that's very, very pointless. I just needed to show you these examples in order to bridge over to the next thing I'm going to talk about, which is the question that I asked earlier in the video, right? Can you replace your entire finger drumming setup with just an FGDP and then be happy and free forever? Well, I think you already know what I'm going to say to that. We've already established the pads, right? They're not the most sensitive. We also established that the toms are in an innovative place, but some things are better played on the traditional layout that I have with the bigger pads and the toms up top. I now showed you a couple of sound examples with an onboard kit and then an addictive drums kit. And for me, I see the FGDP as a sort of a very exciting new friend that I hung out a lot with, you know, over the past couple of weeks. And I'm very happy that I got to meet. But whenever I fire up my old rig, I also do notice the benefits of that, right? And the nice and sensitive pads, the toms in the place where they are, and also the addictive drum sounds that I love so much and that are in my computer, and they're not exactly in the FGDP. There's other sounds in there that are also nice and also exciting, and I'm very curious to discover all of them. But replacing my setup with just an FGDP, no, I don't think that's ever going to happen. Now, it's almost time for a little funky jam at the end of the video, but not before we discussed a couple of small things and one big thing, which is, of course, should you buy an FGDP-50 or an FGDP-30? And I'm going to try and keep this as short as possible. I think if all you need is a little drum kit in a box that you can use for practice, or maybe for when you have a party at your house and a friend whips out a guitar, the FGDP-30 is enough. As soon as you need something a little more elaborate than that, and especially something where you need to be able to tweak settings on the fly, then you do need to save up for the 50, because the big problem with the 30 is that it doesn't have a screen. Look, this is how you get through a menu.
Menu 2. Mixer aux in audio volume. 3. Mixer USB audio volume.
Yeah, so that's how you set up the device. You read the manual, because then you know where to zap through real quick, right? That's how you do it. And then
17. Kit pad node on mute.
Yeah, that's how you do it. And then you spend an afternoon setting this thing up. And then you have 2 memory banks over here, 2 stars, and that's where you save your 2 favorite kits. And then whenever you turn this thing on, you go and play. And if that's enough, then the FGDP-30 is enough. But if you need more than 2 memory banks, this thing has 4 buttons, but also multiple banks, so you can store a lot of presets. It, of course, also has a screen, so you can change some stuff on the fly. Then, yeah, you do need the 50. And I must congratulate the evil marketing genius at Yamaha who came up with this perfect combination of shitty things, right? Where you don't have a screen, but you also don't have a lot of memory. So you cannot just spend a lot of time once and then recall a lot of different presets, because then you wouldn't need the screen. No screen, but also not a lot of memory. That's very, very smart, because that really convinces a lot of people to go and buy the 50, right? Because what else would you buy the 50 for? For this USB thing in the back where you can plug in a USB stick with an audio file? Well, you know, you can also plug in your phone in the aux input. So why would you do that, right? Would you do it for the extra kits and the extra sounds? Yeah, well, there's a lot of sounds in both devices. So do you really need the extra sounds? That extra row of pads? Yeah, maybe for the students of Robert Mathis, but come on, man, he's small fish, right? It's not that many students on Quest for Groove, so screw that guy, right? So I can imagine that Yamaha is thinking like, oh man, how can we convince people to spend more money? Well,
take out the screen and wipe the memory banks.
well, very smart, very smart. Okay, we're almost there, A couple of small things. Both of these devices can be used as an audio interface, so you can plug them into your computer and then run the audio through them. And the main purpose of that is that you can actually record the stereo output of the device directly into your computer without using the headphone output. You cannot multi-track, so it's not like you can run the the backing track and the drums separately or something, or even the drum kit pieces separately. That's not possible when you use it as an audio interface, but you can record the stereo output. You can also, when using it as an interface, fire up addictive drums in your DAW and then play through this little speaker and drum with your own drum VSTs. But in my opinion, the latency then is too high, so it's not really suitable for drumming. In my opinion, I think the latency is a little too high. So I think we're almost there. Oh yeah, one more thing. If you buy a Yamaha FGDP, you go all in on this new device, you have to realize that this pad layout, the way this is all set up, it's unique. So if nobody buys this device and Yamaha discontinues it, you might need to switch back to a 16 pad layout anyways, right? Because people will always keep making 4x4 pad controllers. I don't think that's something to worry about. I would say that the translation from one to the other is not that hard to make. So even if you go all in on one sort of eccentric layout, it's fine. You can translate, and it's mostly about your own inner clock and your groove. And second of all, I, for example, want a lot of people to buy these devices because I want this to be a success so that Yamaha keeps making them and hopefully even improves them, right? Comes out with an even better pro version of these units, and then that's going to be good for all of us. So I'm going to put my money where my mouth is. I hope you too, if you have an interest in this device. And with that said, we can finally start funking out. Here's a funk track that I played along to, which is also very descriptive of what's so cool about these units. I had a very busy week at work, but every night when I would come home, the FGDP-50 would just lay on my couch. I would turn it on. I would play along to that funk track for 10 minutes or something. And in the beginning, I wasn't really in the pocket, but after a week of doing that, 10 minutes a day and then sleeping in between, as I always promote, by the way, in my lessons and courses on questforgroove.com. After doing that, the pocket got a lot tighter, and enough talking. Let's groove.